my dad often wasn't the one to have like the insights on this stuff, but boy, he surprised me one day and he said, "Where's your first customer going to come from?" And I thought, uh-oh, I don't have an answer to that question.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special endurance learning podcast. I'm Brian Washburn. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Endurance Learning. Today, I'm joined by Tim Waxenfelter, who is the other co-founder of Endurance Learning. Hi, Tim. We're going to focus today on 10 years in business and creating e-learning and other engaging learning experiences for a variety of customers. And at a time when half of small businesses in the US close after 5 years, and the average lifespan is 8.5 years. We want to take a moment and celebrate the idea that we've been around for 10 years and reflect on some of those lessons learned and maybe even share those lessons learned, hoping that other folks who are building consultancies or other L&D professionals who are thinking about launching their own business, or perhaps those who have already launched something, they might be able to find some transferable lessons when it comes to building a business, or maybe even some things to avoid. So, hi, Tim, welcome. Anything you want to add to the introduction?
Yeah, the wave, that was for everyone else, not for you. So no offense. I mean, I like you too, but I wanted to say hi to everyone else. Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that I really do believe that we have something unique to offer. That stat around 8.5 years. And there's some other stats with different numbers. And if we were a restaurant, it would be even more amazing that we were around for 10 years. I tried to avoid those numbers as we were going through the 10 years. So I only want to pay attention to those stats now that we've passed those milestones.
Yeah.
I think if you and I looked at where we were at 8.5 years, I think that we were really not wanting to pay attention to those stats. But that's one of the things that I think is, I don't want to give us too much credit for this, but that it is unique is that we're very comfortable sharing those stories of successes and failures. I think back to a podcast years ago where you and one of our colleagues went out to, I think, Chicago and played a game, and we loved that game.
Board game. Yes.
It was amazing. We did it. It was one of our earliest customers. We did this series of sessions, 2-hour sessions. It was amazing. And this was by far the best one. It was so exciting for us. We probably broke our budget on the design of the board game. Complete failure. And I think you may have we didn't do a podcast, but I think you and that colleague did I think I interviewed you for a blog post while you were both on your flights on the way home about our failures. And I think that speaks to, we want other people to be successful. And we've said from the beginning that we want to share what we know with the field. So we want to be of the field. It's something I learned from one of my previous companies. The value is being of the field, not separate from it. So we share what we know. And yeah, I'm hoping, we can share a lot of that on this podcast. And I think speaking of the very beginning, you've got the better memory of the two of us. So how did we start?
Yeah. So this is a funny question. Thinking back, because 10 years, there's a lot of stuff that happens in 10 years. And just taking a look at our company now, I mean, probably 80% of what we do is e-learning development. And then we work with organizations for instructor-led and classroom training. We do train the trainer programs. We have all this stuff. And when I think back to like the origin story of endurance learning, none of that.
I'm going to pause you right there. That was absolutely the vision, that we were going to be 80% an e-learning company. That was what we were going to do. I said from the beginning, this is where our skill set is. No, don't go all revisionist history on me, Brian.
Yeah, well, yes, for somebody who had never used Storyline before we started endurance learning. So I was on the bus. I picture it still to this day. I was on the bus going to work, working on like a lesson plan or something like that. Just on I was using an iPad, and I was like, "Ooh, this is really neat. I can actually do work on the bus." And beyond just kind of using a Word document, I was trying to think, is there a better way? Like, could I create an app, or did I know somebody who might be able to help me out and bring this vision to reality, to create an app that would help people to put together lesson plans that were better, more effective. And this is what I thought the unicorn idea was going to be, right? We were going to create an app that helped people put together lesson plans better, because everybody needs to put together training. We're going to sell it for, I don't know, $4.99 in the App Store. And we were going to retire after maybe 1 or 2 years. So that was my original idea, my original vision. Called you up, Tim, and said, hey, I'm going to be in DC for this conference. And somehow I sold this idea to you too.
Yeah. And I think my first feedback was, it's not going to be an app. Can't be an app. And that's where I got way into the technology, but I loved the type of thinking. And I thought, oh, this is great. We can identify the learning styles that people, that was one of our original things.
Yeah.
That shows how long ago.
Yeah.
And our own enlightenment since then. But we were going to identify the learning styles.
Yep.
In this app.
Yes, an app that helped us with learning styles. Are they auditory, visual? This was all before we stumbled upon Will Thalheimer's work. Before we stumbled upon research that of some of these things that are now debunked. So, yep, we had a design for a beautiful app.
So that's a good story about how we started. But we didn't have a business, right? So we didn't.
No, yeah.
There wasn't anything there yet.
We did.
What was the transition point? I have a memory of you writing a business plan and me saying you don't need a business plan.
Yes.
But I don't remember where the conversation went from that point.
No, I talked with other people that ran small businesses. Somebody suggested that I read a book called The E-Myth Revisited, which I got all into, and there was like a step-by-step process of creating how to be an entrepreneur, right? And creating a business plan and creating an org chart. And first of all, it's just going to be your name all over the org chart. And then slowly, as you hire other people, you take your name out and you put other people into specific roles. And all of that, you said, creating a mission statement and a vision statement and organizational values and all of that stuff that goes into, mature organizations. And you said, I don't think at some point we'll need that. Right now is not that point. And so we kicked around the idea of a business for several years before we actually launched something. I was looking at a blog post today that was from 2012, so 3 years before we even formally organized something. And down at the bottom of the resource that people could download was copyright 2012 endurance learning. So clearly we had an idea that this is going to be something. But as we started to wrestle with this idea for a while and really focus on this app or the not an app type of thing, at some point you got excited about it and took the plunge.
Yeah. And so that was, I think, you kind of buried the lead here, but really we did start the business with the idea of Soapbox. We had a different name for it at the time. And every once in a while it pops up in my documents, the name Perdisco. But we had this idea and we wanted to see if we could build something. And I spent I think it was Thursday nights that I would stay after work and go to the Panera across the street from my office and code and just try to build out this prototypes of a product. And we just kept building. We did a bunch of meetings in person. We met in Chicago once and tested some things out, tested the concept. And, I think it's always hard when people think about like, how do I leave my job? And there are a lot of different stories. You and I each have a different story. We have contractors who've left their jobs and have different stories. For me, it was a good time for me to leave my company and to make the break and start doing this. I'd saved up enough and I was able to go full time. Your story looked a little different, didn't it?
Yeah, I have never had enough money to feel like I'm comfortable covering, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months worth of living expenses before something.
It was a short window of time.
Right. So I did. I had a very different kind of philosophy and attitude. And for people who aren't familiar with this, I'm in Seattle, Tim is in DC. So we were going to do something that was remote. And so when he says that we got together in person every once in a while, that literally is every once in a while. So we would, kind of use our own personal funds to meet up in Chicago or in DC or whatever it might be in order to get some of these ideas going. But for me, I had a wife and kids, and we realized that we needed to treat our spouses and our families as if they were shareholders for something like this, and make sure that everybody was aligned with what our plans were. And so for me, I needed to be able to replace my income to some degree, almost to 100%, in order to be able to really take the plunge full time. So in the meantime, while you worked on coding, this became kind of a side hustle for me, right? So I would work in the evenings and the weekends on whether it was working on this app, or when we realized that you were going to run out of money before we actually had something to put into the market, we had to come up with something else, another way that we could start to generate some revenue.
Yeah, and I love you. You've asked, I think you reminded me of this and of a story. I was at my parents' house, and all good conversations with my dad come over, we'll say a bottle of wine late into the night. And, I had been up to this point, I'd really been supported well by my wife, who said, like, you know, we have this savings. This is why we have it. I want you to be happy. I want you to do what's going to make you happy. And I was talking to my dad, and he's a high school teacher, right? He spent his years teaching. He's a really smart dude. But when I would talk about business stuff, it would often be with my mom, because she was a nurse, but then she went into consulting. And so, my dad often wasn't the one to have like the insights on this stuff. But boy, he surprised me one day and he said, "Where's your first customer going to come from?" And I thought, uh-oh, I don't have an answer to that question.
No, it's a great question.
I really didn't. And I feel like I hemmed and hawed, and I thought, hey, go get us another red.
Right. What a silly question. We're going to have this app and people are just going to flock to it. Right.
Right.
That was our thought. And then when that question came, it was like, oh, how did we not think of this question? And how do we not have an answer for it? Where did our first customer come from?
So I still can't believe this, because I was always felt like I was a good salesperson if I could be kind of in the middle, if I didn't have to close and I didn't have to prospect. So I was always really good at like talking people through everything that we have to offer, et cetera, once a prospect was warmed up. But we didn't have that. Neither one of us was good at prospecting or closing. And I was like, uh-oh, this is not good. We're both good at talking about it once it's happening. So I'll bet I could still find the spreadsheets if I really looked. I did a bunch of research about associations, because we thought we can sell this product to associations. And if not, maybe we can do some training work for them. And I sent out a lot of cold emails to these associations, and I got mostly quiet, no responses. But one guy in Virginia, and I was living in DC at the time, rejected me, but it was the most thoughtful rejection I had gotten. And I thought, this is the first conversation that I've had. So I responded to him and I said, would you be open to going out, getting coffee at some point? So I made the trek. He said yes. Made the trek out to Virginia. I had no sense for how this conversation would go. And I think what he liked was our grit more than anything else, that we were willing to kind of put ourselves out there and try something. And he gave us the opportunity. And I don't do a whole lot of classroom training. I can, but you do. And from the very beginning, we knew if we could get someone to pay you to fly out here, and so you and I could be in the same place and work on strategy and building the business. So we did that. He paid. I think that was our first paying customer.
I still have the check around here somewhere. It was $2,000.
Which is crazy. You can't save the dollar bill anymore like George Jefferson. You have to save the check. But yeah, I think the thing that I've had the conversation with several people, I would say a lot of people who are starting a business or trying to launch a product, that the thing you have to do is be uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, it's never going to work, because you've been comfortable. Working in a job is really comfortable. Maybe not today. There's a lot going on in the world. It's not as comfortable, but in general, it's still pretty comfortable compared to, and then You get unemployment when someone lays you off. When you leave a job, there's no unemployment. There's no promise of anything. You've got to make yourself uncomfortable. And that process, and I can't tell you how many times I've had to do it. When we are really uncomfortable is when I feel like we end up being the most successful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Thinking back on that and then thinking how did we ever turn that $2,000 into this business? And
$2,000, man. We were swimming in it.
yeah.
I paid for nothing.
or you were swimming in it, right? So that was kind of the agreement,
No.
was that we would try to figure out how do we start to bring in more revenue so that you could continue to work on this while I still had health insurance and a salary from another organization, and was able to do this in the evenings and weekends. And we started to land a few other customers. We put this initiative out there at one point that we labeled 50 by 31, where because I was the person who had the connections and the contacts when it came to the learning and development field. And so 50 by 31 was, we had a spreadsheet, and our goal, and you did reach out to some people, but we knew that most of this,
Maybe like 5.
yeah, was that we had to reach out to a total of 50 people by the end of July, so in 31 days. And all of those conversations, I had one conversation with a former colleague from another job that I had like several jobs ago. And he said, there's this guy a really good friend of mine, he's a chef in Minnesota, and I think that he might be looking for some help. And so we connected with this chef and his business manager, and we did like a Powtoon project that was maybe $700, right? A $700 project.
Yeah.
But we started to get something. And another point, somebody had reached out to me on LinkedIn who I had met in my Peace Corps days. Our time didn't overlap, but I think I was leaving as he was just coming into the Peace Corps. And so we were connected on LinkedIn, and at one point he reached out to me and said, hey, we have a training role open on my team. And I said, I'm not really looking for another job right now, but if you need some help, if you need a helping hand, if you need an extra set of hands, while you look for that right fit, we'd be happy to fill in. And so that turned into another contract, and that's where we started to dabble in the world of e-learning. And then at some point, we actually started to land some big projects or some big clients, or what we at that point considered big, right? So I had a former boss that sent us an RFP that we ended up winning, and that was a $20,000 project. And then around the same time, somebody from Michelin, so the tire company, came to us through a blog.
Today.
There you go. Through a blog post, and said, I think that this is really interesting. Do you know somebody who would be able to help us put something together? And that was another $20,000 project. So all of a sudden we're swimming in these $20,000 projects. And I reflected on this and I said, Tim, when we were roommates, the year after we graduated from college, my annual salary was $20,000. And so now we have these two projects that are like, it's one, I work for a company called Callahan and Associates. So it's the equivalent of one Callahan, a full year of working for Callahan and Associates. So that's kind of our unit of measure now. But we started to run into these projects, and we realized that if we did a really good job on the first project, there were opportunities for other work with these same organizations. And that's where the flywheel started to go, to a point where we call that blog post that Michelin came to us the $1 million blog post, because it was a blog post that I had written. There was no fee to sign up for the blog. I had been blogging for several years, and that one blog post caught the attention of a potential customer that turned into recurring projects and revenue that totaled well over $1 million in the lifetime of that relationship. So that's where we started to really grow, and I was able to leave my other job and focus on this full time.
Can I ask you 2 questions around that blog post?
Yeah.
And you may say no to one, you may not have an answer to the other. So the first one is, do you remember what the blog post was?
It was, I think it had an infographic in it. It was something about like kind of the what leads to successful or profitable training. And so I have a vague recollection of it. It did some other people picked it up and had been circulating it. And so that particular person from Michelin didn't even find it directly from our blog post. It was linked from something else.
Right. So the other question is, can I tell the story about what you did with the blog post
Yeah,
immediately to that question?
go for it.
Has enough time passed? And nobody will know who the other people were that were involved.
Sure.
You called me up right after that. And again, at this point, you were still working a full-time job.
Right.
And said, we just got this comment. Should I turn off comments on the blog post so nobody else responds? Because there were several responses from other people that were vendors saying, I can help you with that.
Yep.
We were like, comments closed. we don't need any discussion. You said, you think it's okay that I did that? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
That is our blog.
So
They do not need to be commenting.
So two people actually did reach out to this person and engaged him in conversations. And life could have been very different had that person been engaged with the other people. He actually said, thank you for your comments and your outreach. I actually would like to talk to Brian about this.
Yeah. And that, for context, for us, it was life-changing for our company. I mean, that was over 6 years worth of growth as a company, starting with one very small project at Michelin and eventually touching every division of Michelin North America. We did truck tires, we did large machines, we did underground mining, we did aircraft, we did everything that was related to that, and not just about tires, really about sales, about customer support, every topic imaginable. It gave us such great experience and a learning over that time.
Yeah.
It was a big change for us.
And I think this is where we get into the conversation where this went from a concept, right? The app, which turned into kind of a web-based tool, which turned into, that's kind of our passion project, but now we have to start working with paying customers. And that turned into, we have enough work to put food on both of our tables and then some. Maybe we need to start to hire some people. And all of that snowballed into, this is no longer just about kind of learning and development and lesson planning or e-learning development or whatever it was. It really kind of started to get into the transition from a passion for learning and development to, how do we run a business? And I tell people all the time, I never, ever wanted to run my own business. And in fact, endurance learning would not be here for 10 years or more had this not been a partnership as opposed to a solopreneurship. So do you want to talk a little bit about that transition from going from a passion for learning and development to the need to actually focus on running a business?
I do. But I think we have taken up enough time today. I think we should make that a separate topic. And I think we have enough to talk about, because not only did we add other people, we always talked about us as a Venn diagram of skill sets. We had an overlap, but there were a lot of differences between what we knew and the experiences we had. But there's so much more around the team we've built that I think it's worth another full episode.
Fair enough. So I guess there you have it, folks. There's your cliffhanger ending and maybe a reason to come back. So I think that the next time when we get together, we're going to talk about this idea of how do you go from kind of a concept and a passion for the subject matter, whether that's learning and development or whatever you're building a business on, into an actual business. So come back, join us, and we'll take that conversation further. Tim, thanks a lot for just kind of taking a stroll down memory lane with me and talking about some of these things.
Now I'm waving goodbye to you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Train Like You Listen podcast. Brian and the team at Endurance Learning offer a range of products and services to support almost every learning and development need, including Train the Trainer workshops, custom e-learning development, and the award-winning training development platform, Soapbox. You can learn more about all of these and get a wealth of free resources at endurancelearning.com or by clicking the links in the show notes.